Hey folks, today I'd like to talk about Russell Brand. No desire here to pile on in terms of criticism, nor any intention to defend. It's just, it's newsworthy at the moment because of this sort of, scandal that's broken out. And I really just want to look at his horoscope and understand, some of what leads a person to be in this kind of situation. Now, Russell Brand needs almost no introduction. Since roughly 2006 or whatever, he's been almost a household name in the sense that this is when his, movie roles began to appear with greater regularity. He had a regular radio show in the UK. And since then, he's gone on to host any number of award shows, and he'd be a regular presence on BBC and other entertainment platforms, much to the delight of many and the disgust of others, because his his behavior has been on occasion over the top, and so he's drawn criticism. He's been invited to things, he's performed, and he's been kicked off the show at the end of it. So really, kind of a sketchy kind of review overall, but still. He is very much an active presence, certainly on YouTube in the last couple of years. So what's at stake these days? Well, a sort of an investigation was conducted, and now there are allegations from originally four and now I think five women regarding episodes dating back to, well, some of them almost 20 years ago, in which it was alleged that he, conducted very abusive behavior, both verbal and physical, constituting, sexual assault in some instances. And so now, as a consequence, BBC has removed many of his clips from their archives. His agent has parted ways with him. YouTube has shut down his money-making capacity. And he's currently in jeopardy of some sort. Now he's come forward and made public statements and insisted that he never forced himself on anyone, that all of his sexual adventures were consensual. And he asserts again and again that, look, this was in a period of my life where admittedly I was very, very promiscuous. And he has in the past admitted to all kinds of stuff, to drug addiction, to bulimia, to pornography addiction, to sexual addiction, and all, the sort of, chain of behaviors that go along with that. So he's been fairly forthright about all that. Admitting to being promiscuous, however, does not, negate the fact that, some form of sexual assault may have occurred. And in the eyes of the beholder, that is still a reality, and as we might see, in the eyes of the law. So, I'm not here to judge any of that or to defend him or accuse him. Simply, I want to look at his horoscope and say, how could this have come about? So, with further ado, let's take a look at that horoscope. So here is Russell Brand's horoscope. He was born 4th of June, 1975, a minute after midnight in Grays, England. This renders a Capricorn ascendant, and the only angular planet is Venus. So, in my most recent book, Kama Yoga, which covers, love, marriage, and sexuality through the lens of Jyotish, I discuss, among several other topics, one's inclination to marry. And so there's a few things that we can look at there. When you have Venus in the angles, well, in the first or seventh house, influencing the ascendant, there's a romantic nature. However, at the same time, when you have the ascendant lord, in this case Saturn, occupying the sixth house, one of the Dishtanas, and particularly in one of a sign of either Mercury or Saturn, there can be a distinct reluctance for pairing up, partly because the person themselves do not feel entirely self-confident to engage in the necessary dynamics of a long-term relationship. And so that might make them sort of a bit shy of the prospect, and not shy of light and casual relationships, but shy of serious relationships. A bit of a mixed bag there in terms of his horoscope. But before I leave this, I should point out Venus in the seventh house, although it can reflect a kind of, romanticism, it can, it is called in the literature karako bhavo nashto, which effectively says, when the significator for the thing is located in the house, indicating the same thing, unless conditions are perfect or ideal, it can create jeopardy in terms of potential relationships. So, I mean, this is the first thing we see when looking at this horoscope, some, risk for varied circumstances and consequences with respect to relationships. Now, let's go further. The salient thing about Russell Brand's horoscope is this extraordinary concentration of planets in the third house. So there we have Moon and Mars and Jupiter, which occupies its own sign, Pisces. So this creates a powerful third house. Now, the third house is one of these kamashtanas. So the kama bhavas or kamashtanas are houses 3, 7, and 11. Generically, the third house represents desire, and not necessarily sexual desire, but desire in the sense when I say I want to have a good life, a good job, a happy family, whatever, I'm expressing a want, a need, a desire. So it's on that level that third house represents desire. And then the third house also represents courage, the capacity to act upon one's desires and to initiate activity. So, it's important in the horoscopes of athletes and performers of all kind who sometimes must overcome their own inner doubts and fears and exhibit a certain degree of bravery in the face of opposition or in the face of, 10,000 people watching you. That takes a certain degree of courage. So Jupiter certainly is well placed here in the third house and strengthens that whole notion of desire. Okay, that's all well and good. Now, what's interesting about this combination, however, is that take note of this. The three kama bhavas, the kamashtanas, are 3, 7, and 11. Note their lords. Jupiter is the lord of the third. The moon is the lord of the Cancer 7th. And Mars is the lord of the Scorpio 11th. So all three of them are found together in the third house. So they're all lords of water signs, Pisces, Cancer, and Scorpio. And they are all found together in Pisces. So the other kamashtanas are the seventh house, which, leads directly to, one-on-one relationships and intimate relationships per se, because it is the house of sexual activity itself. The 11th house is the house of hopes, dreams, and ambitions, and friends, and social, occasions and organizations. It's part of the extension of our relationship building capacity, if you like. So we start with desire, we move on to one-on-one relationships in the 7th house, and then we move on to one-on-many relationships in the realm of social interaction on a broader level. So back to this, Moon, Mars, and Jupiter, all three Kamasthana lords, all located in a Kamasthana itself. This is a signature for a very strong desire nature, which can indeed make a person, very active in or fixated upon the whole realm of pursuing one's desires, especially with respect to, performance, the third house, social interaction, the 11th house, and the pursuit of, generation of income through that, those same efforts, and particularly with respect to intimate one-on-one relationships, as are indicated by the 4th house. And we've already noted that Venus representing, Katako Bhavo Nashta already creates a kind of an Achilles heel vis-a-vis relationships. So, Russell Brand has been, he's got a pretty wide swath on both sides of the Atlantic with, notable partners, Katy Perry being most notable among them. But the marriage only lasted a couple of years. He's also dated, Jerry Halliwell of the Spice Girls, and any number of other actresses and models and spokespersons and on and on and on. Uh, the numbers really do add up. But by his own admission, he says that he was very promiscuous during this, entire era. And mind you, he is still in his Venus Dasha. His Venus Dasha began in 2007, which is almost coincident with the beginning of his real popularity. He had a career before that, but it was spotty and it was not all that public. But he really came into the public eye in a big way. 10th Lord, the only planet in a Kendra in the 7th house. Venus Dasha promised something of that. They say the most, remarkable periods of one's life will generally occur during the Dasha of one's ascendant Lord or one's 10th house Lord. In this case, Venus certainly fits the bill. But back to the cluster of Moon, Mars, and Jupiter. In my book, Kama Yoga, I go into quite a bit of detail talking about this concept of the Purusharthas, which are basic objectives and justifiable goals and objectives in a person's life. And they are somewhat similar to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There's Artha, which is, the need for food, clothing, and basic security. After we've got that nailed down, we move on to, the sort of the nice things of life, whether that's finer clothes or finer food or music and other adornments that are, what we kind of consider luxuries. Then after that comes Dharma, which is basically when you've taken care of yourself, you begin to think of others and say, well, I want to spread my wealth or my abundance with my community, sort of, doing the right thing, have an occupation that does no harm, and, try to live a life of some largesse or noble, sort of activities. And then the last phase of it all is moksha, where we realize at the end of a life or towards the end that, despite whatever security and enjoyments and goodwill that you've dispensed with others, you can't take it with you, and that it's time to sort of think about the closing of the cycle and letting go of all this stuff. And that's the moksha period, which is typically, kind of resignation from the world and a spiritual sort of attitude where you prepare yourself for moving on to your next incarnation. Back to this cluster of 3 planets in the Kama Shtanas. So Kama, as in Kama Sutra, sort of the handbook of love matters and pleasures in not only in sexual relationships, but pleasures of many kinds. So, he's got this in spades because Jupiter occupies its own sign in Pisces. The moon, the 7th Lord, is with that Jupiter. It forms Kesari Yoga, which, reflects a bit of a schmoozer, somebody who delights in social interaction, can get along well with other people. We see it in the horoscopes of, good salespeople, marketing people, anybody who excels at the whole sort of meet and greet kind of thing and socializes very well. Okay, all well and good. 11th Lord, Mars, is there with Jupiter as well too. And Moon Mars, of course, forms chandra-mangala yoga. This is one of the basic wealth yogas because its basic premise is that the person is driven to be active in some regard or other, and sort of they're the opposite of a couch potato. They're not going to lie around waiting for things to happen. They're driven to make things happen. So Moon Mars can be a great motivator, and in the house, in the 3rd house, it can give a great deal of drive. But As I discuss again in this book, Kama Yoga, Moon and Mars also constitute a very significant passion combination. Why? Moon is one of the good girls, Moon and Venus. Mars is one of the bad boys, Mars and Saturn. When you get pairings of a good girl and bad boy, excuse the language, but it's descriptive, Moon and Mars, for instance, is a very potent passion combination. So he has that, and so that contributes to a romantic initiative, but also a sexual drive as well too, and can very well lead to promiscuity. Why promiscuity? Well, dual signs promote duality and multiplicity. So you've got all three Kama lords, Moon, Mars, and Jupiter, residing in Pisces, which is a dual sign. So you get this notion of multiplicity from that. Water signs are also what we call Kita Rashi, and they are indicative of the abode of critters that multiply with abandon. So it can include, insects and fish and other and reptiles. So here we have a whole bunch of planets in water signs as well too. Moon, Mars, and Jupiter and Venus, which occupies the seventh, are all in water signs. So Venus occupying a water sign in the seventh house is also a sign of some, multiplicity and variability in terms of relationships. The seventh lord is the moon, and it's in that dual sign Pisces, which again, adds to that. The seventh house, where Venus sits, is aspected by Jupiter. And Jupiter is, again, the lord of abundance, and it's powerful in the sign of Pisces, where it is strong, and it's in a dual sign that, again, also promises abundance and multiple opportunities for partners. All of this conspires to, throw in his karmic path an abundance of potential partners, romantic and sexual and, admittedly personal as well to our professional is what I meant to say. And yet there's, some degree of suffering in all this as well too. If the seventh lord moon goes to the third house, we can regard that as also a upachaya house. It's one of the, it's considered to be a mild dushtana. Therein lies some potential for, sideways movement and some irregularity. That moon is afflicted by Mars by association. It's also afflicted by Saturn by aspect. So, that doesn't constitute a passion combo so much because there is no vital link between them other than aspect. Be that as it may, that moon is still afflicted and a little bit on the dark side. It's waning and it is, 1058. And, so it's a little bit more than 68 degrees away from the sun. So it's a bit on the dark side. That moon could even be considered, verging on malefic. And therefore, again, some degree of jeopardy vis-a-vis relationships. So again, we're not going to judge what's going to happen to him. I am simply validating what he himself has declared on record. This was a period in which I was very, very promiscuous. To his credit, he was married to Katy Perry. When they divorced without a prenup, he could have laid claim to half of her net worth, which was some 40 million at the time. To his credit, he did not. He's since been married, and with his current wife, he has 2 children presently, and I think a third on the way. He may very well have mended his ways. And we're, after all, going back to a period that was many years ago. But again, these are still serious allegations, and now Metropolitan Police of London are investigating it, and we shall see what will happen, never mind the court of public opinion, what will actually happen in legal circumstances. So that remains to be seen. And I don't mean to dwell on that any more than to say, here's a horoscope that shows a bias for such behaviors. I don't mean the sexual assault, I simply mean the sexual promiscuity. There are abundant signatures for that here in this horoscope. And, now this turns out to have had some consequences in that regard. That's it. That's all for that. Okay, back for just one little bit to scoop up something that I neglected to discuss in the main section. So we don't have the horoscope in front of us right now, but you can separately look at it. So, this whole thing, these allegations and, the consequential fallout for Russell Brand has occurred during his Venus Dasha, as I already said, but Mercury Bhukti. So it's worth just looking at what's going on vis-a-vis those two. So Venus occupies the nakshatra of Saturn. Therefore, during Venus Dasha, it will also give results for Saturn. Now, Saturn is Brand's ascendant lord, and it occupies the 6th house, where it is afflicted by Mars. And so there's a notion there of potential conflict, competition, and more to the point, litigation, because 6th house is the house of litigation. If we need further evidence of that, we could then move on and say, look at Mercury, the Bhukti Lord, and see what's going on in that regard. And there you have Mercury is the Lord of the 6th house, that very house of competition and litigation. And Mercury is also the Lord of the 9th house, which is, the media world. And, currently he's being tried, in the court of public opinion. But once the Metropolitan Police complete their investigation, we'll see what will happen with that. And I suspect that there will be litigation at some level or other as a consequence of his being in this Mercury Bhukti, because it has only just begun in July of 2023, and it will run until the spring of 2026. So this is not going away anytime soon. He's transiting, currently got Saturn in Aquarius. He's now approaching the pit of Sadasati when Saturn will go into Pisces next year, I think it is. These will be difficult years for him. So let's see what's going to happen. Okay, that's as much as I wanted to say for today. Thanks for listening. Take care. See you another time.